But hi again, welcome everyone. I'm Carmen Peña Abrego. I'm with the Houston Public Library, and we're always so delighted to be hosting public poetry the first Saturday of every month. And with that, I'm going to just turn it over to Fran Sanders with Public Poetry.
Thank you, Carmen. It is truly a pleasure to be partnering with you for the past 10 years, and I hope we'll be doing it at least 10 more. Welcome, everyone. It's a fabulous day. I'm glad you can take the time to join us today. I want to say just a couple of quick things about what Public Poetry is up to. We have a contest, which is actually based, the prompt is film and video. You have a choice of 5 of them. You can go to publicpoetry.submittable.com and get complete details about that. We will be doing a book launch on the 21st of November for the Wicked Wit anthology, and I hope all of you will join us for that. And of course, we're here the first of every month, and for those of you who might be interested in film or video, we will have our Poetry Film Festival coming up in February, the 24th through the 28th. And you can find information about that on Film Freeway /Real Poetry 2021. Our website is publicpoetry.net, and you can see everything that we're up to there as well. So, without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Leela Merrill, who will be telling you about the poets who will be reading today.
Hi, welcome everybody. Our first featured poet is Randall Watson. He is the author of 4 books, which have won or were finalists for many awards. Randall is the editor of The Weight of Edition, an anthology of Texas poetry from Mutabalas Press. His poems have appeared in or are forthcoming in various journals and anthologies, including Chariton Review, Chelsea, Shenandoah, the Georgia Review, Literal, the New Criterion, North American Review, and many others. Please welcome Randall Watson.
Thank you, Leila. Thank you, Fran. Hello, everybody, other readers, welcome. So this is from my most recent book, The Geometry of Wishes, came out in 2017. It's called The Divers. Swimming pool, bayou, gulf. Only the surface changes. And everything we touch is a surface. Even your body, submerged, is a surfacing. Simply to touch it proves you have risen. Just as I, being touched, become the surface too of something. Just so do we measure the body, call it circumference, travel, though no one really knows what is surrounded there. If you want, you can name it, whatever you wish. Names also are a surfacing. There is nothing good or bad in the surface, only in the way we touch it. So reach deep, love, into the wish of that naming, and surface into me. Touch my wrist. Give me your word. And here's a short one. All right, since you wanted some short ones. Don't worry, I smoke, it's not COVID. The Dakini, number 2. I have 2 poems in this book about a Dakini. Dakini is a kind of female Buddhist bodhisattva in the Tibetan Vajrayana tradition. I probably said that too fast. Don't worry if you don't know about Tibetan Buddhism. The poem doesn't really require that. But it places the underlying sensibility of the poem. No death, she says, no dying. Sometimes the white dog sleeps in the sun. The clover rises up above the grass to welcome the brightness. A footstool rusts on an office roof. Only what lasts is real, she says. and you can find it. Not in the thing itself, but in the place it comes from. The sky like the roof of a cave the horses cross under. The speckled bird and its circling analogies. The eye as large as everything it sees and the generous and empty mind it rests in. No work but in the watching. No labor but in the letting go. All the beauty between the stillness and the changing. Okay. I haven't timed these, so if I go over, just wave your hand or something. I guess I'll read Night since that was on the send out. I guess I should read that. Night. It's actually a section in a longer poem. Night. Night is holiday, his sister early, wrapping and surprise. Like these athletic carnations pinned to my shirt, a Wonderland pharmacy. Sometimes I look at the clouds and I am full of that reaching, beyond that charity, a man pursued into a ritual of color, an obscurantist. Once I saw a picture of a cockatiel upon a one-eyed dancer's shoulder, bright as the lamp he carried with him, a perfect speck of blindness and vision. Remember how I showed you there beside the pond, beneath the corrugations, the blue underwater glow, late evening, the silk swaying above us, the tint of my way forward. Poetry, you said, when you were smooth as endless, unimprovable summer, and I was shiny as the inside of a shell, turned outwards for everyone to see. After Boccaccio, as you all know, I'm sure Boccaccio wrote the Decameron. So you could say this is a pandemic poem of a sort. The Decameron is a book of stories of a bunch of wealthy Florentines who retreated from the plague of Renaissance Italy, and they hung around in a kind of isolated via and told each other stories to pass the time while everybody else in town died.
Happy times.
What, Winston?
Happy times.
Happy times, indeed. Yes, yes, yes. Hey, what do you got but now? Right after Boccaccio, and it's written as an epistle, a letter, and so it gestures, appropriates an old sort of convention of European literature, where sometimes people would write stories or poems, and it would begin "Dear M" or something like that. In other words, they would never actually name the direct audience that the poem was purportedly addressed to. So it's just a literary convention. So I've used that, I've borrowed that. After Boccaccio, Dear M, forgive the weeks. These days my keeping flows like runoff into a scoring that ends in the river. And I move at the confluence where the measure is unmarked. The silences are steep beyond the margins. All the constant motion, bird screech and flutter, the slow yet tentative pace of a passing doe grazing the scrub oak, a raven swooping low over the pinyon grove, the swaying half breezes. They deceive me into calling them stillness, as if movement were a strictly human frenzy. Thus my response is inhuman, not as disregard, but in its calendar, and the calendar's scale, undone like a shadow, persuaded by the sun. I am sad to hear what you propose the cities have become. Interiors contagion by invisibles that stalk the currents, as when resentment becomes the dominant theme and thinking serves it. I too am as inconclusive as a multitude. This is why I have come here, too high almost for trees to grow. Sometimes I want to return to that flat country where I was shaken by my love for you, that humid bay, boats rolling, teeming with spoonbills. But memory is dreamlike, as when one turns one's head to breathe while swimming and sees the sky and notes it, the rhythm of its appearance, its breadth, the moving clouds, a gull, the sun momentarily obscured and then emergent. It's so peaceful, yes, a kind of rest within the pattern of our efforts. These days, I spend my hours charming the local wildlife, disappearing into a kind of patience, eliding the inherent specter of my predation, dissolving into a minimum of vacancy and welcome. Birds now feed from my hands, chipmunks, deer approach. The creatures acquire me. You would like it. Chickadees gather outside my door. They perch the banister, scanning the windows for movement, my evidentiary. When I step out, they flutter, hop, lift and turn their heads with a new vigor, flit to a tuft, swoop down to pluck a nut from my hand. I like to think I am divesting my hungers. I understand your concern and your fears. Irresponsible, you might say, even though you know my beginnings. I know the hard times will set even harder, but I am unresolvable. I will not return. The crowds have forgotten themselves, while here, among these firsts, whose eyes are never surrogates, well, it's all a delight for me to be their familiar. And you remember, don't you, how delight can spare us? It's like an apothecary. For one brief moment, we are well. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy.
Thank you, Fran.
Hi, had to get unmuted there. Thank you, Randall Watson. That was great. Our next featured poet is Erin Ballou. Erin is the author of 5 books published by Copper Canyon Press. Her books have won several awards and honors. Her new book is Come Hither, Honeycomb. Erin Ballou's poems have appeared in places such as The Best American Poetry, The New Yorker, Poetry, The New York Times, The Atlantic, Tin House, and many other publications. She co-founded VITA, Women in Literary Arts, with poet Kate Marvin. She currently teaches at the University of Houston's MFA PhD Creative Writing Program and for the Lesley University Low Residency MFA in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Please welcome Erin Ballou.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming out today. And thank you to the organizers for making this happen and for creating such a pleasant event and for putting me in the good company of the wonderful poets that I'm reading with today. Always like good company. I was sort of tickled listening to Randall's beautiful poems. I should say I'm reading from the forthcoming book, Come Hither, Honeycomb, which is out in February. So the book's still fairly new in terms of me reading it. So I'm using you as guinea pigs today. But Randall started with the poem about diving, which really pleased me. I was a competitive springboard diver from the time I was 4 until I was 21 years old. And I'd always wanted to write a poem about like what a central part of my life being a diver had been. So apparently, I hope every poet here today has a diving poem because a theme is emerging. So I will start with a poem that kind of references this called She Returns to the Water. The dive starts on the board, something Steve often said, or rub some dirt in it, princess, when in his lesser inscrutable mood. Steve of the hair gel and whistle, a man who was her diving coach, who never seemed to like her much, which was odd given objectively her admirable discipline and natural gifts, the years and years of practice, and the long row of golden trophies she won for his team. The girl she was then, confused, partly feral, like the outdoor cat you feed when you remember to, but won't allow to come inside. She's thinking of Steve now, many years later, while swimming naked in her wealthy landlord's pool, or grotto to call it properly, an ugly Italian word for something lovely, ringed as it is with red hibiscus, white lights and the mimosa trees draping their blurry pearls along the water's skin. It's 3 a.m., which seemed the safest time for this experiment, in which she's turned her strange and aging body loose. Once a man she loved observed, "You're the kind of woman who feels embarrassed just standing in a room alone." A comment like him, 2 parts ill-spirited and 1 perceptive. But this night she's dropped her robe, come here to be the kind of woman who swims naked without asking for permission, risking a stray neighbor getting the full gander, buoyed by salt water, all the tough and sag of her softened by this moonlight's nearsighted courtesy. Look at her, how this woman is floating while trying to recall the exact last moment of her girlhood, where she was, what she was doing, when she finally learned what she'd been taught, to hate this fleshy sack of boring anecdotes and moles she's lived inside so long, nemesis without a zipper for escape. A pearl is the oyster's autobiography, Fellini said. How clean and weightless the dive returns to the woman now, climbing the high metal ladder, then launching herself. No fear, no notion of self-preservation. The arc of her trajectory pretty as any arrow in Saint Sebastian's side. How keen that girl, and sleek, tumbling more gorgeous than 2 hawks courting in a dead drop. Floating, the woman remembers this again, how pristine she was in pike, or tucked tighter than a socialite, or twisting in reverse like a barber's pole, her body flying toward its pivot, which is, in those seconds, the infinitesimal, before each possible outcome tears itself away. The woman is climbing from the water now, like the silvery tissue hiding a costly gift. So we were asked to read a shorter poem, so I have chosen, I'm just trying to make sure I haven't lost track of time. I have chosen Villanelle because it's such an exciting moment, I think, for any poet who's had this experience to wait all your life for the poetry muses to hand you something that actually works for a villanelle, because villanelles, to find lines that are that bear repeating multiple times in the way that a villanelle does is not the easiest thing. Hopefully I've accomplished it. So this is a shorter poem called Instructions for the Hostage. You must accept the door is never shut. You're always free to leave at any time, though the hostage will remain no matter what. The damage could be managed, so you thought. Essential to the theory of your crime, you must accept the door is never shut. Soon you'll need to choose which parts to cut for proof of life, then settle on your spine, though the hostage will remain no matter what. Buried with a straw, it's the weak who start considering their price. You're no great sum. You must accept the door was never shut and make a half-life there, aware, apart, afraid your captors lost you so far down, though the hostage you'll remain no matter what. Blink once for yes, and twice for yes. The heart makes a signal for the willing, its purity sublime. You must accept the door is never shut, though the hostage will remain no matter what. Trying to find a cheerier poem. I can't say this book is full of cheery poems, but I'll do my best. Here's one. This is a poem, you know, I went back to therapy recently, and what I discovered in therapy is I'm about as housebroken as I'm going to get at this point in my life. You know what I'm saying? I just sort of realized, yeah, I'm bored. You know, it's terrible when you go to therapy and realize you're telling your stories and you're actually boring yourself. But the good thing that I got out of it was one of the things a therapist, this recent therapist, who was a great therapist, she was not the problem. But she asked me to describe this feeling of anxiety I was having. And she said, what's the metaphor for that? And I said, it feels like one of the gargoyles from Notre Dame is like sitting on my chest all the time. And so I was sort of intrigued by the idea of this particular gargoyle who seems to be hanging out with me these days. I bet you have your own version of the gargoyle in 2022, possibly. So this is called, pardon me, In Which a Therapist Asks for the Gargoyle Who Sits on My Chest. There's a couple references here. One is to the Fenian incursions, which was the Irish rebels in the 19th century, in typical Irish fashion, decided they would steal Canada from Canada and give it to the British. I guess they thought the Canadians wouldn't notice. And the only other reference in here, you know about Cassandra, who in the ancient myth, she knew the future, but she was punished by no one being willing to listen to that. And the other thing is a reference to the glyphs of Rongo Rongo, which are in Easter Island, these mysterious glyphs, and nobody knows over thousands of years who made these glyphs into the wood there. So this is a poem called In Which a Therapist Asks for the Gargoyle Who Sits on My Chest. Better say first, the gargoyle she's requested, I doubt he'll appear. A fragrant character at most. He's so wily and hard to woo. And God knows I'm terrible at therapy. The pushy box of tissues and kindly on the clock neutrality. It's exhausting how the whole's designed to scrub our greasy pan of sorrows to a gleam in which we've actually paid to see ourselves. Caveat emptor? Oh, verily. To talk and talk like this is what our age calls progress, that peculiar human rage for moving forward, like tourists walking off the cliffs while taking selfies. But since I've come to talk, where I'm urged to use my similes, it's apt to say I feel most like a Fenian incursion, the third botched skirmish specifically. God bless the Irish, those poets, for thinking they could hotwire Canada, then sell it to the British. Though this makes perfect sense to me, another unsurprising outcome of an ill-considered plot, conjured awkward in a haystack near a town namesaked for that rebellion's leader, one John O'Neill, a man with such a gift for losing, he finally thought he'd really rather not die trying, and proving therapeutically it's best to recognize your limits. Charged with speaking honestly, I'll confide I think it late for custom order hindsight or rigged stories spat into our mouths when we were only infants by the one bitchy fairy not invited to the party. What patterns there might be emerged Cassandra style, with inner portents left for me to sort, then artfully ignore for half a century. Maybe that's the weight we grown-ups mule. Being untranslated books the book club never votes to read, its measure heavy as the Eastern Island glyphs of Rongo Rongo, a mystery bitten into wood by ancient shark's teeth. Maybe it's enough to recognize ourselves unsolvable, half trash, half glitter bomb, dropped along the trench by dying stars. The French say, who can say? And since they basically invented what we know of dread and food and love, this seems a likely place to make like Ginger Rogers, forever waltzing backward down the stairs, partnered with a man who never liked her, that feathered, practiced creature, bleeding in her heels. Her step's not what I'd call the act of any faith, but more a process of elimination until she finds the bottom, searching for her mark while spinning toward the promised spots of light. Apparently, I'm losing my voice in the middle of a reading. That's a pleasant discovery. I think I've got time for one more short one. I'm going to have to leave early today because I'm spending every single minute of my life doing leading voter turnout for 2 different literary organizations. So, I encourage you to vote, make a voting plan, make sure you know what you're doing, make sure you get out there and vote, and take 75 other people with you. So this will be the poem that I finish with. I want to thank all of you for being here today and for the organizers inviting me. I think my voice will last a little bit longer. Trying to find this poem, As for the Heart. It must be in the book somewhere. Here it is. I thought this poem was appropriate because it was the last one I wrote in Houston before I hightailed it back to Florida so that I could be with my son during the pandemic. So this takes place at the Macy's in Friendswood, if anybody is keeping track. As for the heart, I am come to the age of pondering my lastness, buying what seems likely my final winter coat at Macy's, or when a glossy magazine so very blithely asked me to renew. As for my heart, that ever pixelated tweener, how tediously long I've been expected to baby her complaints, unloved, alarmed and stubborn clock, refusing to listen even when the more intrepid tried. Now she mostly mutters to herself, though occasionally there's some clanging, a tinny sound, like the radiator in a Southie triple-decker, fractious as a pair of cowboy boots in a laundromat's dryer. It's always been this joke the old ones know. In such a state of nearly doneness, the world grows sweeter, as if our later days were underscored with music from a nocturne's saddest oboe hidden in the trees. Just yesterday, while standing in the kitchen, my son complained nonstop about his AP Psych class while wolfing warmed up bucatini from a crazed pink china bowl. Shiny, kvetching creature. Even if I could tell him what he doesn't want to know, I wouldn't. But now the pissy storm that spent all afternoon flapping like a dirty sheet has wandered off to spook some other neighborhood. There's one barbed weed pushing up greenly through my scruffy loropetalum, and it falls on me, this little cold rain the day has left. Thank you for having me here. See everybody later. I'll see you at the voting place, okay?
Thank you so much for being here. I know your time is tight. A word to everyone. On Zoom, we have a clapping hands or applause button. You might find it either at the top or at the bottom of your screen, depending on what setup you have going on. So let's please give another hand for Erin Ballou. I'm going to hit mine. And of course, you can do claps and snaps on your screen. And in the chat, something people have started doing is using asterisks, which means snaps. So many snaps and claps so far. Our next featured poet is Winston Durden. Winston's poetry publications include Big River Poetry Review, Ilya's Honey, Harbinger Asylum, the Texas Poetry Calendar, Blue Collar Review, Barbaric Yacht, Plum Tree Tavern, Down in the Dirt, and many other publications. He's a lifetime member of Gulf Coast Poets and a 3-time Word Around Town veteran. Please welcome Winston Durden.
Unmute. There we go. All right. I'm back. Okay. So I don't know if anybody else knows, there's a concept that I reference at the end of this poem. Is a musical concept called blood harmony, and I hadn't heard about it until recently, so I mentioned that. It refers to people who are related by blood are supposed to have a tighter, sweeter kind of harmony than other singers, but I guess David Crosby and Graham Nash might have something to say about that. So as poets, we're often encouraged to read other poets and to read books about poetry. And this may be a poem that puts an end to that. It came after a Billy Collins binge and after I read Tony Hoagland's Art of the Voice. It's called Sensational. In Sunday Morning with the Sensational Nightingales, subtle irony, Billy Collins praises gospel group after gospel group. Soul Stirrers, Swan Silvertones, Dixie Hummingbirds, excuse me, 5 Mississippi Blind Boys, actually the 5 Blind Boys of Mississippi. And I feel sensational because he's listening to gospel radio in his car, and I have their music in my collection and more. Reverend James Cleveland, Mighty Clouds of Joy, Edward Hawkins Singers, Fairfield 4. And I understand if you didn't care to distract from rising on the nightingale's wings of song to debate the discord of doctrinal disjunctures between his kneeling religion and their evangelical brand. For in spite of my background in staid Baptist tones, I too can ascend on a gospel chorus, conscious only of the sublime sweep of harmony, the blending of notes exceeding any sounds nature sings, birds twittering relentless solos, the hiss and yowl of cats, the bark and growl of dogs, the bleats and grunts of cattle and sheep, devoid of euphony or knowledge of tonics and augmented tones. For despite the nightingale's sweet song, Mr. Keats, sensational nightingales alone sing harmony, which is why I revel in the human ear, the sonic subtleties of the human mind, not aspirations to some higher thing displaced to an imaginary divine, but the power of multiple voices combined to animate the transient glory of song. So Billy, when next Sunday comes along, if you're cruising with a Harmony Jones, but not necessarily hankering for Jesus, stop in and I'll spin you some doo-wop. Flamingos, orioles, ravens, crows. But if there's no harmony without heaven, we could wade into some bluegrass, awash in the blood harmonies of early Bill Monroe, the Stanley Brothers, Delmore Brothers, the Louvens, Del McCurry with his sons and their cousin. That's that one. I put together kind of a musical set for this first go. This one's called Long Play. I was watching a concert video of Willie DeVille in the Lowlands, and this is sort of him and his band. All the guys in the band got gray in their hair. All the guys in the band got killer rhythm. Drums punching holes in the dark to make stars. Bass line mapping stars into constellations. Singers all honey and gravel and smoke, whenever you need, whenever it's needed. Ain't nobody jumping around, guitar players sitting down. A dodgy heart or something like that. Hunched over a first generation Strat. Beat to shit, but goddamn he can make it sing. Lucite slide on a ring finger, tracing those holes in the night, stringing constellations into a cosmos feet believe in. His, the first believers. First to tap the universal rhythm, confirmed in motion down the bar and across the floor. Dead solid beat with subtle variation, teased out pace, lyrical phrasing. No wah-wah, chorus box, fuzz tone, or flanger. Just flexing fingers, flexing strings and fretwork fingers. Pickup lines from a solid body. Head displays horns, worn lopsided, pounded for reverb, shaken for resonation. The bassist is smiling, cool. The drummer sweats steam rising. The singer adds harmonica to purring, growling, pleading, shouting. The band rocked on for hours. Every tune one you'd heard before, but never better. The guitar player finally stood up when the show was over. And then this is the third one in this set. It's called Meters. It's about the Miles Davis album, Sketches of Spain, sort of a jazz landmark. It's been around for a couple of decades, more than a couple. So it's to Miles Davis, meters. Miles, the plains haven't changed since you sketched them. Dust devils filigree the breeze, collapse in shivering heat, where rain rarely touches red rock earth. Fluted siroccos ride cushions of tympanic air, lift museum ghosts on minarets to arc arrows of song, between stuccoed walls where nights before mosaic halls echoed trumpet triumph to matadors, and penny whistles piped dawn in ancient accents of oud and lute, eluding Andalusian cool. All the while, miles away, mountain haze, a cooler kind of blue, whispered Kilimanjaro. That's my set.
Thank you. Our final featured poet is Patricia McMahon. Patricia writes poetry for adults and literature for children. She is the author of 14 books and a graduate of the Center for the Study of Children's Literature. She has worked in publishing and is past president of the Foundation for Children's Books. She is also the founder and director of the Mosswood Retreats. These happen every June in a lovely spot on the coast of Maine. She's a committed traveler and has lived on 4 continents. Please welcome Patricia McMahon.
Sorry, I'm getting messages. Afternoon, thank you for inviting me. The first poem I'm going to read was not written for this year, but it might sound it. The reasons I am currently unavailable for death. Because I'm on the verge of tidying my desk, I swear. And I still cannot hold a tune in a bucket, yet I have a song list ready for my debut. I will wear a large flower behind one ear, and there is someone who says he can teach anyone to sing. And my closet is a right mess. No one else should have to clean that out. Trust me, I did my young mother's 8 months after her death and just before his new wife moved in. And although I'm sure it would be the right thing in the long run, I cannot imagine someone taking my place. And because there's a barely open copy of Finnegan's Wake on the floor, and I still wonder, what was Joyce thinking? Then again, on the plus side, I would get to ask him. If he's there, and there's a directory of the dead, if there is a there, who the hell knows? I don't, and I am flat out not ready to find out, because long black hair needs braiding. And the red-haired boy has not yet fallen in love. And the brown dog needs to chase a yellow ball again and again and again, while a blue heron glides low over the prairie, the sight of which means I will have good luck today. I was taught that very young. Who knows, maybe only my people from Minamore think so, but the belief has made it to me, and I have not passed on all I know to my children. They might put shoes on a table for God's sake. Then bad luck will sneak in the back door and no good will ever come of it. Such as their mother could die young before I told them that I sang the same song every night to honor my mother, who left before she told me what she meant, as she clawed my hand on her deathbed, saying over and again, I'm sorry I tried. Because I don't know, have I tried enough? Because this is my life, and I still want it. This is called the 2-Star Hotel in Beijing. Multicolored plastic guts spill from broken ceiling tiles over an elevator opening to 14 girls dressed as Minnie Mouse. Whether for an occasion or not, I cannot tell. My son's eyes widen as the lady mice squeal at his red-haired existence, pose with him for an eternity. We fight our way onto the elevator, down to the restaurant where two elderly Swiss men in lederhosen yodel along to the rhythm of ancient wheezing, seemingly alpine instruments. A portly Swiss miss travels the room with them, a jug on her shoulder, beaming with delight at each and every one of us. She sways to the alpine sounds. Still red-faced from close contact with that much female, the boy nods as I explain over the strudel that this is why one travels and stays in two-star hotels. After a safe return to our room, only 7 photos of the boy by tourists trailing a flag bearer, I sip from my small drink, American whiskey, on our balcony over a courtyard. Interior windows into the hotel's ballroom display the elevator girls and many more young people of Beijing dancing to strobe lights. A smell of charcoal floats on the night air. My son sleeps inside after explaining with unnecessary patience the plot as only he understands it of a Chinese Western on a small square television. I would film this night if I could, backlit, uplit, up from one small cigarette burning across the way in the dark night. I will not include your entrance when, an hour or so ago, you staggered in to undo this evening's spell. This is my black and white opus, so I choose to edit that scene. The unhappy couple standing too close for no comfort goes on the cutting room floor. Instead, I show a small boy fallen crosswise across a bed, 6 cowboys shooting each other on a snowy Asian mountain, bop music of all things coming up from below, and me out on a chair sipping my bourbon. This is the way I film it. This is the way I go on. And then one more. Sorry, I'm going to, my computer make noises for reasons I do not understand, but I do not have a close personal relationship with my computer. It's a poem called These Are the Facts. My mother wore a gray coat that day, A-line, you might say, with large white buttons. Her hair was pulled back with a rubber band from last evening's vegetables, a barrette on each side of her face. She had spent the day before on the couch, lying there when we left for school, and in the same pose and the same place when we came home. I made dinner. No one cleared up. She stood now at the end of the supermarket aisle with her cart, waiting for the other mother who has 7 small children but no car. Once a week they shop. The carts piled so high you had to wonder, where's the money coming from? My mother, who has only 5 children, turned to see books displayed at the end of the supermarket aisle. Atlases with jewel-tone covers, one for each continent. She picked up Africa, turned it over. The bright red book went into her cart. Asia next. Our neighbor caught up as my mother added Europe, Australia, both the Americas. She was startled by Antarctica, as we were later astonished when my mother laid them out on our table. 7 new books with a shine on them. Hiding on the stairs, I opened Africa. The pages hummed as I turned them. When I put one finger on a map, Uganda whispered, "Come here." I nodded. Slowly turning pages, I heard more voices. Bailamos, said Spain. I could dance, I thought. Had my mother found magic books in the market? Or was this her one, her only charm? Did she chant words under her breath, blowing gently on the books as she handed them to us. I do not care which tale was true, the books were real. And so when she died too young and we buried her, I did what the maps said I should do. That's my poems for now. Thank you.
Before we begin the open mic, I would like to make a brief dedication to a very special poet and activist, the fabulous Billy Duncan. Billy, this reading is for you. Thanks.
Thank you, Fran. So I'm going to do something a bit different for this round of open mic. I'm going to read a poem. We generally have a one per customer rule here, and it doesn't have to be a poem that you've written. It could be one that you just love that somebody else wrote. And that's the case here today. We here at Public Poetry have been running a little social media campaign called Voter Literacy. We've been putting out information on how to vote, how to make sure you're registered, little reminders of key important dates. So here's a friendly reminder. If you are not registered to vote, or if maybe you had a change of address, your deadline to make sure all those things are in order is Monday, this Monday. And like Erin said, you may need to make a plan to vote. It's not always easy everywhere for everybody. So that's a thing to bear in mind. And we'll be putting out more information in the coming weeks as well. So I hope you all will get out there and vote. This poem I chose is related to the 19th Amendment of the US Constitution, which turned 100 years old this year. This amendment was initially written to grant women the right to vote, and if you look at the history, you'll see that didn't quite grant all the women the right to vote, but it was a start. And a lot of efforts have gone in to ensuring everyone has the right to vote here. So I'll stop chit-chatting about it. There is an epigraph, so I'll read that first. This poem is called One Vote by Amy Nezuko Matil. After reading a letter from his mother, Harry T. Byrne cast the deciding vote to ratify the 19th Amendment of the US Constitution. My parents are from countries where mangoes grow wild and bold, and eagles cry the sky in arcs and dips. America loved this bird too, and made it clutch olives and arrows. Some think if an eaglet falls, the mother will swoop down and catch it. It won't. The eagle must fly on its own accord by testing the air slide of each pin feather. Even in a letter of wind, a mother holds so much power. After the pipping of the egg, after the branching, an eagle is on its own, must make the choice on its own, no matter what it has been taught. Some forget that pound for pound, eagle feathers are stronger than an airplane wing. And even one letter, one vote, can make the difference for every bright thing. Again, that's One Vote by Amy Nezuko Matil, and we encourage you all to get out and vote in this election safely. So, for the rest of open mic, I am making a list, because I always need a list. Next up, I'd like to have Kendra, followed by Stuart and Rebecca. And yes, Billy Duncan will read. If I could ask Billy to wait to be our finale, that would be awesome, if you don't mind, Billy. So like I said, next up is Kendra ready? And Brian, it's not too late. I've got you. The list will continue. Before we finish the open mic, yeah, just raise your hand or say something in the chat. So let's see if Kendra Leonard is ready.
I am. Thanks for unmuting me. What a wonderful reading this is. So my poem is called The Witch's House, which I thought might be nice for October. Wisteria makes the witch's house and that of their familiars and the summoned and entangles magic natural and celestial and domestic. In the witch's house, the baby is raised by crows who caw and coo and talk to her all day long. In the witch's house, the kittens have extra fangs, and they drink the milk of countless grown familiars and sleep in the embers of the fire. In the witch's house, the night hags sing lullabies and rock the baby's cradle, guarding her slumberland with knives and salt. In the witch's house, lilac hens cook vegetarian breakfasts and take naps on ruffled beds floating in a lake. In the witch's house, the baby plays in a stupa built by ants and miniature elephants, watched over by a dryad. The wisteria wraps everyone up to shelter them from the too hot days. At night, it unwinds to let the house take its fill of star-flavored air while the moon dandles the baby on its knee. Thank you.
Thank you. Is Stuart ready?
Yes. Let's see. Okay, yes. Hi. Thank you. Thank you to all the poets reading. Good to be here. Good to see all of you. I'd like to read a Robert Frost poem from his first collection, which is called A Boy's Will. And the poem is called Mowing. There was never a sound beside the wood but one, and that was my long scythe whispering to the ground. What was it whispered? I knew not well myself. Perhaps it was something about the heat of the sun, something perhaps about the lack of sound, and that was why it whispered and did not speak. It was no dream of the gift of idle hours, or easy gold at the hand of fay or elf. Anything more than the truth would have seemed too weak to the earnest love that laid the swale in rows, not without feeble pointed spikes of flowers, pale orchises, and scared a bright green snake. The fact is the sweetest dream that labor knows. My long scythe whispered and left the hay to make. Thank you.
Thank you. If Rebecca's ready, we'll have her up next, followed by Wafa, Susan, and Pravadri. You ready, Rebecca? Hey, Rebecca, you ready? Are you muted?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry, I didn't realize my headset wasn't on. Okay, so this poem is a new one. It's called In the Bulrushes, and if you're not familiar, that's taken from the story of Moses. And this is a retelling. I turned away from you, nestled in your vessel, knowing as I climbed to the bank that the commonplace was a stone's throw away. Only once, and I awoke at midnight and knew that I'd conceived you. Only one night, in the light of a single lamp, and then he was gone, shipped out for some war. There is no place in the temple for a woman like me, shamed and shameless, no hope of a name for you. The swollen river danced in the evening as I laid you, lullaby somnambulant, in the little boat of reeds I'd woven. How carefully I'd cut each green stalk in morning light, full of prayers to the waters. Nothing kept watch on the lonely bank. It was as if the world had turned its face from a spoiled woman. My tears might drown creation, and still my will would soar above the deluge, certain that the river knew how far to take you downstream, where your mother would reel in my singular hope. Thank you.
Thank you. That's lovely. Is Wafa ready?
Hi. Can y'all hear me? I don't know if you can. Okay, so I'm gonna read a poem of mine. It's called Filthy Dishes. I will say trigger warning, it does deal with incest. So yeah. Filthy dishes. I hear sounds of water gushing from my kitchen. I'm startled. I find my father holding a filthy plate, forcing the sponge on its edges. Water is running, aggressively spilling, clouding my pretty pink counters. I didn't want this, but it didn't matter to him. Say thank you, he says, and I do. I wait for him to finish. I clean my kitchen counters that he did dirty. I jump back in my bed, force myself to sleep for another day in the kitchen, another night cleaning his cum. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Susan Ellis, and followed by Pravadri, Jillian, and Brian.
How about now?
There you are.
Okay. This is obviously about COVID, but it's trying to keep the humor in every day. So, virus villanelle. Breathe out, brace yourself, then slowly breathe in. Each breath has its dangers, of that you're aware. You won't live in fear, you won't let it win. This novel virus separates you from kin. Each passing day makes it harder to bear. Breathe out, brace yourself, then slowly breathe in. Stock up on TP, sanitizer, and gin. We all have a face mask ready to wear. The fridge and freezer are packed to the brim. Plant some seeds, pull some weeds, empty the bin. Curl up, binge Netflix from your comfiest chair. Breathe out, brace yourself, then slowly breathe in. Organize your spices, line up each tin. Whatever you do, don't cut your hair. But then again, maybe just a wee trim. Isolation begins to get under your skin. Count your blessings, don't give in to despair. Breathe out, brace yourself, then slowly breathe in. Breathe out, brace yourself, then slowly breathe in.
Thank you. Pravadri, are you ready? We don't have video yet. There.
Hello, everybody. When I was in class 5.
We're having problems hearing you.
Am I now audible?
Yes.
Oh, that's better. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I named it A Friendly Ghost, and actually the topic that was given from our school to write was that we met a ghost, but we're not scared of that ghost. So I decided for writing a poem, as I always love to write poems. So once I met a friendly ghost sitting up on the chimney. His clothes were torn, and he wailed and mourned. He had bulging white eyes, which were not worth a sight. So I decided to ask him, why was he so slim? He never answered. He cried and cried. He was not a thing that could arouse fright, but he was terribly white. After some time, when I fed him lime, he answered, "Hi, my name is Geraldine." He offered me a piece of cheesecake and claimed that it was his own bake. I laughed at his lies. But then I saw tears in his eyes. "Please forgive me," I said. "Please come to my house, eat, and go to bed." "I am a ghost, a friendly one," said he. "We will be friends from now on for the world to see." Thank you.
Thank you. So next up, we'll have Jillian. And if anyone else would like to read, please let us know.
Hi. This is a sonnet I just wrote. Can you hear me okay? Okay.
Yes.
Thanks. Apparition. I'm going to try and remember what I'm here to do with this life, in this body and mind complexion. And if I can't, let me at least write a collection of poetry, the craft of observation, the dew on a leaf's skin, or the ambient hue of evening sky. Using words, the weight of concrete to prove reality, and these days reality needs proving, like a shadowy dog, a shape-shifting fog in my mind's eye. So we sit outside, she out of sight, but never out of mind on the grass, which carpets our ephemera. Grief is an appetizer for this light, a transformation like an unstable gas. I can't see anything inside this camera.
Thank you. Bravo.
Thank you.
Next up, we'll have Brian Beard, and we will finish it off with the fabulous Billy Duncan. Brian, are you ready?
Yes. Awesome. Thank you. This is called Tools. I followed you through the glass doors, down the fluorescently lit aisles, growing smaller with every step. I didn't ask to come to the hardware store, but neither did I ask to be born. You reached into the bins, sure of what you needed. I carried your jangly metal things, your screws and handles, your latches and brackets, your voodoo in a brown paper sack. You spoke to the locals in a language I did not know. When they didn't give you a deal on lumber you insisted you were owed, you asked to see a manager, threatened to make a scene. When I complained, trying very hard not to sound whiny, you told me I was too sensitive, that I should relax, that the customer is always right. Back home, I held the measuring tape for you, the marking chalk, the wood itself, while you made the circular saw scream out in lamentation for the grinding up of ancestor bones, and you grunted and sighed, desperate to make whatever you wanted to make of your life, to fix whatever you wanted to fix in our home. My blood sugar low, the cartoons over, the daily horrors having already begun to dribble out of the grim mouth of the nightly news host in the other room, I considered walking out into the darkening street and not returning. Even at 6 years old, I favored the simplest and most elegant solution. Even then, I had no trouble believing I could make it on my own. You handed me a screwdriver and offered me a test disguised as a tutorial. Of course, I failed miserably. You're just not good with tools, you concluded. But it's not true that I'm not good with tools, Dad. These words are tools with which I'm making you this casket. Thank you.
Bravo, and thank you. All right, to finish off our open mic, we have a very special guest. If you have shown up to poetry events in Houston, you probably know Billy Duncan. This fabulous poet recently celebrated an important birthday, so without further ado, please welcome Billy Duncan.
Hi, how is everybody today? And thank you for the lovely introduction. And Fran, thank you for being so supportive and wonderful and honoring me this way. You are a true friend and I love you. I'm going to do a poem from my new book, Requiem for the Plastic Clown, which drops in a couple of weeks on October 16th. And you can get it, it's up for pre-sale on Weasel Press website if you want to buy it ahead of time. Anyway, this is the first poem in the book, which is dedicated to Al Pennison, the plastic clown. And this is a poem I wrote to him while he was still alive, and it's called Cotton Candy. There is something elegantly hidden in the scribbles of a clown. Perhaps the white page is makeup, and beneath the printed words, there's another face, a different story. Most children laugh at his silly hair, ridiculous shoes, incessantly honking horn. Others cringe in fear, fear like drowning in a dream or hearing foggy footfalls. It is all pretense, he says, all theater, all application of nonsense. No real harm. But when you creep to the edge of the muddy field, pull up the hem of the tent near the creaking stake, peek inside his dressing room, you see him disrobe, cowl off his face, and see another clown. His diary lies on the table. Should you risk your life? Try to find his other layers in the words he wrote in solitude? Or should you play it safe and take the coins your grandpa gave you? Buy one more cotton candy, a massive pink pile bigger than your head that dissipates to die in sticky threads against the tininess of your warm and silent tongue. Thank you.
Thank you, and happy birthday again. So now that we have had an excellent open mic round, if you'd like to give everyone another round of applause or some snaps, please feel free to. You all did a great job. Let's welcome back our three remaining featured poets. We'll start with Randall Watson.
Oh my. That was wonderful to hear everyone read. Hi, Billy. Hi, everyone who I haven't seen in a while. This is also part of a longer poem called Shikoku Triptych. Shikoku is an island in Japan. There's a Buddhist pilgrimage in which you walk the 1,700 miles circling the island, dates back to the 8th century. And so this was in part inspired by the 900 miles of that I walked some years ago. So it's called Geisha Love Concerto. Woman of waters, Bodhisattva dressed in salt and mirrors, arms crossed and folded. The 1,000 hands of evening greet you, fire sister, groomed by moonlight, a prayer on the soft, wet underside of your upper lip. O daughter of thread, O shelf of jam glasses and plums, widow of bells, of barn swallows, indigo, small-mouthed also. Palace of fishes, youth. Not the drop of water that falls, but the one that is rising, the one that returns the black-eyed praise of roundness, the frill and scallop of the mouth as it sings, low tide open. Praise this brokenness, praise this bead and harp, this coldness, white-haired evening with its mallet and pipe and music, left arm high, the face reflected in the courtyard well that is luck and tomorrow, house of muscle and breath and violin. Give us this day, this polished eye, this hope, this love, straightening our hair at twilight by the glare of red lanterns, the thrill of paper set aflame. I'll go back to my first book. It's called Spirit. Spirit. You've looked for it in the cars suddenly huddled together beneath the gas station's metal awning to escape the hail, in a small lake or pond or any single body of water that is the source of two rivers. Like love, perhaps it is our word for faith without belief, as when a whirlwind staggers towards trailers or tin houses. and the people wake to the drifts of the disembodied throat and its dark burrow, only to call that heart an eye, as if the stillness at the center of its rage were a kind of vision. And this is another one for our times, though it's an older poem called Revolution. Excuse me. Don't worry, I'm not sick. I just smoke. Revolution. That evening when I was in Austin to see Coco in Le Bourgeois Gentilhomme, and the man next to me was practicing stabbing movements with the long handle of his spoon, and the woman across from me was crying and singing loud to Alanis Morissette, and then bragging about the $6 silver coat she bought at Value Village in Houston. Do you know Houston, she asked, and then crying again until another woman with very large breasts in a black dress with gold embroidery like an expensive sombrero came over to hug her and offer her something to smoke, to burn, to strike at. Because she also was sad and angry, and for a lot of good reasons too. Which was when the boyfriend opened his laptop and the file with the picture of the rat on it, where the medieval village was not mysteriously empty, because anybody who knew anything about the history of film realized that the villagers had gone to the castle, fast and drunk and ready, finally, after all these years, to kill. Seemed appropriate. All right, how about this one? Another persona poem called Commission, in which someone is committing, speaking to someone to do a painting for them based on one of their favorite quotes by one of their favorite writers. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Simone Weil, the French philosopher. Wrote things like Gravity and Grace, wrote a wonderful essay on the Iliad. Anyway, a very interesting woman. Has a wonderful little essay called On the Abolition of Political Parties. Anyway. And my favorite quote from, I believe, her book called Waiting for God. She was Jewish, and she became Catholic, but she refused, through all these letters with one of the French cardinals, to convert officially because, well, I don't want to paraphrase her reasoning, as it's quite complex and theological, but it's fascinating and it's profound. So, Commission. And the quote is, "The sea does not look less beautiful because we know that ships are sometimes wrecked by it." If you please, portray her surrounded by light. Not the familiar light of devotionals, not light as in the ancient icons of the Annunciation, not at all as in the slender necks of the swans of Ionia, but more like the light in the factory windows of Hamburg in 33, just after the elections, or like the face of a priest, neither self-conscious nor provincial, visiting the modernist boudoir of a rich American, come to Brussels in the spring. Render her soul, for she had one, its kinetic, grave as despair and wonder, light as a blue dress speckled with lilies, via the stylized miniature of a farm girl slaughtering a pig, the landscape, a Frankish pastoral, the pendant dangling from the machinist's throat. Also, include angels beside her, if you would. I know, but I'm sentimental. One wearing a shirt that says Sunoco in red, the other parking its scooter. Each of them curious, playful, bearing bright swords at the borders of her tenderness. I would like to honor her in this way, because she did not turn away from what she saw, and she saw the beauty in what she did not turn from. And I guess, I don't know, I'm not looking at my watch. This is a long poem. I think I have time, right, for a long poem? Yeah? I don't know if I read this or not. The Field. Anybody know if I read? You guys wouldn't know. Why would you know? The Field. In winter, of course, its limbs are bare as antlers. That's beautiful and sad. But this isn't winter. This is the season of trucks sweeping by, spraying for mosquitoes, white steam like an exotic megaphone hissing from the top-mounted nozzles, then disappearing, voiceless, upon the air. Because of the bordering street, of course, there's detritus. 2 clear glass bottles of Corona huddled in a mound of thistle, slivers of green lime wedged in their rigid throats, a lonely sandal. And of all things, a copy of Antigone, a smudged alphabetical grocery list penned to its back cover, Tampex, tomato, and then a boy's name enclosed in a star. It's quite standard, this field, quite approachable. If you stood there, in that other corner, you can see it all without turning. How the breeze brushes past it without lingering, how the shadows turn slowly, lovingly, grow long and fade and then reach long again, reversing themselves as if to balance the morning, till sundown comes and they seep, seamless, into the earth. It's the kind of field you might have loved when you were a child, just an ordinary field of innumerable weeds and grasses, blossoming sedge speckled with rust, dandelions like dreams from an era of lightness. After heavy rains, with predictable birds, robins, jays, sparrows, and starlings, swooping down after the downpour, bobbing like thirsty mechanical seahorses to peck at the softened dirt, whole flocks then rising, like scattered impressions coalescing into a single idea when a car honks or a person passing by shouts or curses. Shouts and curses, imprecations, human voices. These too inhabit the field. Surveyors, peering through their scopes, pause for coffee and a smoke, the spikes of the tripods scoring the field, the large triangles like the intentional symbols of an alien symmetry, blending with bird call and the rasp of flies, the delicate scuttle of beetles, a clash of precisions. And the ground, flat yet thinned, like a lake as a storm approaches, or a season, familiar and welcome. To the north, a street, nameless for now, moderately traveled. To the south, a neighborhood of renovated houses with new garages. And then in one corner, southwest, a dogwood, that old symbol just small enough for a child to climb into, bruised flowers scattered at its base. By August, it's overgrown by new grasses, bold yellow stems tall enough to hide you. Teenagers, it's rumored, coming home from the billiard parlor or the lake, sometimes nest here, whispering when people pass by, drinking cheap wine, their mother's brandy, as delicate and fearful as doves in a thicket of scrub oak, matching the mournful sounds of the swaying birches. There are other trees too, at the borders, obscuring somewhat the houses. Oaks, maples with thin bark, spotted as horses, indolent, calm, bearing the phases of the moon upon their leaves and branches, easy to reach, thick, mottled trunks like the maps of continents we have forgotten we've been to. When autumn comes, they cast their leaves to the field, like gracious emperors, and the leaves, bright yellow, red, like decals, sometimes grow slick and heavy in the rain, only to wither in the sun, turn crisp and brown and light, and in their stiffened forms scatter to the street and the nearby fences, sometimes deep enough to wade through, deep enough to burn. In winter, you might find it less interesting, though I don't. The grass is crushed and faded, the dirt exposed and paler, a kind of ruin. But even now, before the snows come, it's alive within itself with what remains. There's a vigor in its apparent barrenness, like someone who's been somehow injured, but knows they'll recover, that they'll heal. There's a kind of contentment in its brokenness, a kind of certainty. This is why you could say I love the field, how still it can become, like the memory of a city or a farm from a different century, a lithograph of skaters on a frozen pond, how the snow drifts in runnels then deepens, grows smoother, unbroken, to balance on the field's dry body, earth and air and water eased in the meeting. But soon the field will encounter a new measure. The grasses will be uprooted. The birds will find a new place to feed and settle. Young men and women will learn to drive, gazing through their windshields as at a video of a dangerous country. Something will replace the field, though I cannot tell you what it will be. I suppose I should mourn the field, but I don't mourn it because I should. I mourn what was not its emptiness. I mourn not just what thrived there, but the way it thrived, how its surfaces obscured its efforts, how utterly available it was to every arrival, how it moved this way by staying. Others, I think, I hope, must also have loved the field. Perhaps a girl from the nearby houses fascinated by minutiae. Perhaps a man or woman recently divorced, hurt by the unexpected pattern of their life. Or just a person walking by who, suddenly, recognized the solar vigor, that cosmic rustle of chickweed and thistle. Mostly, though, I think of the girl, digging with a rusted trowel, sliding the blade into the damp earth to scoop an ant mound up in an unbroken wholeness. I understand the surprise on her face, the terror, and the joy, as the ants, in what must be thousands, hordes, emerge from below. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, let's welcome back featured poet Winston Durden.
Right. I got 4 poems here, and the first 3 were in the March edition of New Reader magazine. And when I submitted them, there were 2 others with it, and I didn't realize that what I had done, but they put them together in a sequence, and I realized that maybe I should have thought of that first. So this is from a book I'm putting together. It's about a friend of mine who ended up getting a divorce, and he was about 50 and found himself trolling the Google egg. It's called The Perfect Bouquet. I'd like a bloom that says, this is a tentative opening, but hopeful. A stem that says, I don't know how long I can keep this up. Blossoms that say, I'm hypoallergenic, quite safe to be around. Maybe more than a few of those. Ferns and greenery, lush and full. Baby's breath may be presumptuous. No arrangements with thorns. I bleed easily, should the flowers be returned. And please, perhaps for later, an additive for the water that won't let buds decay. And then this is later on in one of his relationships. It's called Breaking Girl. What chaos within sent you to the psychiatric ward again, my little box of horrors? What corrupted love darkens your psyche? Cracked on the inside, bending not your nature? Have I asked you to explain what you're afraid of understanding? Does that sharpen your appetite for another fistful of pills? Then I won't repeat the question. Your emotional jiggle du jour doesn't much matter. It's a rolling state of crisis to distract from abandonment, fear, and anger. How casual the emotional brutality you use to stave off love, the hurt before imagined hurt, when all that's offered is caring. What power, that weakness of emotion encased in rigid will that drives you, frightened little girls at the control of a woman, who hides her eyes and thinks she goes unseen because she cannot see. And this one is called Take a Little Time Without Worry. It's later on in things. I'm carrying an empty beer keg up marble steps. A businessman with a briefcase holds open one of the double doors and says, "Where are you going?" I'm slightly incensed by his question. I answer, "To the train station." Inside, the white marble floors look gritty and worn. I realize I do not have my wallet, that I left the hotel without it, that I don't recall where I was when I last had it, perhaps at a restaurant table. I think, go to the next city, book a hotel room, come back for the wallet. I think, that's stupid. I can't remember the name of the restaurant. I can't remember the name of the hotel. Surely that will come to me. It doesn't. I remember instead 3 empty beer kegs need to be washed out. I then consider a woman who once loved me wants me back. She has multiple identities. I'm not sure where she left me. And this is my last one on this set. This is the first one and the last one here are the shortest of the ones that I have if you want a short one. A little personal manifesto, I suppose. It's called Sparky. Never intending harm, I've done damage following inclination and convenience. It is the mark of my humanity, the brand of our tribe, learning by blundering blind, sorry and blameless, or damnable of inconsequence, another atom of confluence and contagion in the swirl, aiming unready for what I might be, firing at will. I never burned any bridges. They ignited with sparks from my heels. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, let's welcome back featured poet Patricia McMahon.
There she is.
Sorry, I didn't unmute. Sorry. Thank you, everyone. What a great open mic. Great poems. This poem begins with a line from a poem called The Memory by Robert Creeley. And the poem grew out of a conversation with a poet I admire about the difficulty of making love poems interesting. So the poem is called Did Wonder Pour Down on the Whole Goddamn Town? No. That afternoon, the park was full of the all of us, spinning on the tilted turner, kissing in corners. On the broken table in the sparse grass, I stood declaiming glorious nonsense to fellow fools, for I believed it would show the way away from home. Over in a corner, you winked. I turned to say more in another direction. You circled, said, I see you there. I had no idea who was in the mirror, so who were you looking at? I ran hard from these streets where everyone told the wrong story. You seemed to turn up on corners. I sought someone who would declaim sagas in a faded canvas tent, I knew not where or when. You said, beware men who declaim sagas in tents. I wanted a craggy man who sailed far enough away from me to smell the salt all over his body. You said, here's a fishing rod. I tried the man in the van driving round the desert with his Punch and Judy shows. You said no one watches puppets in the desert. You should have said beware the green puppet. You gave me a faded canvas tent. You said I was a show you could watch for years, until on that one night in the old lanes, what I thought was a ballet dancer leaping alone in the misty air under a streetlight was the last flutter of your heart. This is an important poem called Sparing the Eggplant. With an eggplant in my hand this morning, I indulge my fantasy that I am a great cook. And if I fill my cart with all this green, orange, yellow, table after table of food will arrive, which prevents the cancer from returning, and conversations at the table will once again include the children we adore. They will still be young, saying things that swell our hearts, so we do not realize they are this way, but for this day, till one day they are gone away to adults. But as I heft the eggplant, thinking I will learn something by the weight of it, like a farmer holding a pig by the front haunches, at that exact moment, I accept the fact that I no longer like ratatouille and no longer want to make ratatouille, in spite of the fact that before those children, I would always make ratatouille when guests came with poulet provençal. The names alone spoke to where I wanted to be at a table in the world. Now, the bloom is off the vegetable melange. In fact, I decide right now I will never make it again. Today, I leave the eggplant out of my cart, a dramatic moment for me, if not quite a reprieve, as say, for a too small swine. We are all dodging death that little bit each day, like the piglet that didn't weigh enough. Like Carol Mary, who sat in the back seat of a car between Trichard and Evander in the middle of nowhere, Highveld, South Africa, giving me a lecture on why you should always have a comb on you somewhere, broken in half, for ease of transport, because you never know. Look around you, dearie, she said. Where will you find one here? We argued about the fact that I thought my need for smooth hair would never be that great. And she said that my problem was that I thought it important enough to serve French food, watery garlic soup for dinner, but not enough to care about myself, to fix my hair in a pinch. I realized at that exact moment how deeply I could love someone possessed of inane ideas. Never could I have imagined, not for one single second, that later I would not speak to her for 2 years, only to discover that she had died. And at this moment of the eggplant rejection, I realized that I will never again be young enough to think that friends do not die. My children will always turn to me, and that it might be possible to dislike the food that I thought made me the sort of person who would be stopped outside the Gare du Nord for directions because I looked like I live here, that I was the sort of person who served poulet provençal with ratatouille at my table. And I'm going to give you my best as far as short poems. The two are connected. The last time on 7th Street. The white gate no longer swings open, the hinge rusted. The bushes, once small and filled with bees to run from screaming, are grown too tall, too wild for this small space. A narrow concrete path leads around back where the sapling is now a great tree. But the green pitcher is still moist on the outside on this summer's night. Iced tea filled with mint when she grew it on the other side of the house by the tulips, wrapped in wet paper, carried to the kitchen. The mint's no longer there, not a tulip in sight. Still, the pitcher will hold a handprint on this evening. Peach cobbler on the tin table, pastel pajamas for the 3 girls on hot nights, seersucker, lying in the bedroom across the hall for one with big shoes by the door for a big man. Her side table piled with books. Over here, a silver brush and a mirror, a cut glass perfume bottle. Jesus gazes down from one wall to his mother Mary on the other side, while my father, who has slipped out of time, stares across the room where my young mother's ghost combs her hair with a long-handled brush. The children are nowhere to be found. And my last one, again, thanks for Lila and Fran, everybody puts these together. The title is The Ad in My Email Asks. The ad in my email asks, did you know you can call your mother on Skype? I most certainly did not. Technology has a way of getting ahead of me, so I did not know that now we can call the dead. But yes, I'm in, certainly. Please tell me how to dial my too long gone mom. If you will excuse me, before we proceed, I do have a question. Has this all been thought through? To be clear, will there be visuals? A bit problematic, I should think, after all this time. Or might she be lit by a glowing celestial light? I've heard that mentioned. Certain presumptions are involved here, and this is becoming theological. Still, if it is possible, shouldn't one try? Won't she be surprised to see me? I mean, hell, it's been a while. Will she be expecting this me? Has she been following my progress? Angels watching over me, my Lord, and all that jazz? I'm just not sure I believe in my mother floating along all gossamer. And I have to wonder, will this me disappoint? I am older now than she was when she died. So there's that. My mother is younger than me. Processing. Will we slip back to where we last were? We often did. And then she will surely not like what I am wearing. What does one wear for such an occasion? I don't know. But no matter, I'll give it a go. If only to have the chance to say, even now, after all these years, I would still, every day, wish you had one more day to stay. Thank you so much for listening.
Very, very well done. Thank you. Thank you, Patricia, and all of our other readers. I think Fran might want to say a few words, and we will have our group photo. Get ready. Camera's on.
Okay, so I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone who read today. There is a committee that puts together the poets who read. So in case you're wondering about being a featured poet, that's done through a committee that changes every year. I'd also like to mention that we are a membership organization, and that's what keeps us afloat. So if you'd like to be a member, or even if you wouldn't, you can always go to our website, publicpoetry.net, and check us out. So now I'm going to turn it over to Carrie for our traditional group photo. Come on and...
Okay, hi everyone. Howdy guys. I'm Carrie Riegler. My job here is to take the photo and of course to record this fantastic reading. This has been one of my personal favorites so far. So if everyone would turn on their video so we can see your beautiful faces, we can work on taking a picture. Okay, so I believe we still have a few people. Okay, there we go. Some people turning on. Okay, so the way we take pictures here at Public Poetry, we say 1, 2, 3, poetry. So I will count y'all down and then we all together can say poetry. Okay, let's be prepared. Let's get ready. Okay. So 1, 2, 3, poetry. 1, 2, 3, poetry.
Poetry.
Okay, that's good. Thank you, everyone. This was a great reading.
Thank you all. And we're always here the first Saturday of the month. So hope to see you next time. Bye.
Thanks, Fran.
So
Thank
good to
everybody.
see
Thanks, everybody.
everyone.